Chapter 1. There is a specific silence that lives inside expensive apartments. Not the honest kind. The kind born from emptiness that at least has the decency to announce itself. This silence is furnished. It has linen throw pillows and a coffee bar with a built-in grinder and an unobstructed view of the Charles River from the 38th floor. It smells like cedar and pressed cotton and the faint trace of a candle Isabel burned alone last Wednesday, because Wednesday had been a hard day. Hart had been in London, and she had long since stopped waiting for him to ask how she was doing. She stands in front of the bathroom mirror now, running concealer under her eyes with the practiced economy of a woman who has long since stopped hoping someone will notice the tired underneath. The gala starts at 8. It is 6:49. She learned these skills years ago, not from a book or a conversation, but from accumulated mornings and evenings that added up quietly the way debt does. How to zip your own dress. How to clasp a bracelet one-handed against the vanity edge. How to walk into a room built for couples and arrange your face into something that reads as chosen rather than left. Women don't announce when they've stopped expecting help. They just get faster at doing things alone. Isabel Warren is 29 years old and looks like someone assembled her with intention. Deep brown skin that catches light warmly. Natural hair pinned up tonight with the kind of effortless precision that takes 40 minutes to achieve. Collarbones that carry tension beautifully. Eyes that watch everything and reveal almost nothing. A professional skill she developed in law school and never quite managed to leave at the office. She pulls on the dress. Midnight blue, structured, expensive in the way that says I chose this rather than someone bought this for me. There's a difference. She knows the difference. From the other end of the apartment comes the sound of Hart on a call. She recognizes the cadence immediately. Short declaratives. No laughter. The specific flatness he uses when he's negotiating something he intends to win. She's heard that voice for 3 years. She knows its rhythms the way you know the sounds of a building you've lived in long enough. The elevator that clicks on the 11th floor, the pipes that knock at 3 in the morning, the silence that settles after a call that didn't go the way he wanted. She used to appear in the doorway during those silences. Used to set a glass of water on the desk beside him without saying anything. A small and wordless form of fluency between two people who understood each other. She doesn't do that anymore. She isn't sure when she stopped. Only that the stopping happened gradually, and then completely. She does not go out to check. 3 years ago, she would have. The ceremony had been the kind of evening the legal world dresses up for once a year. The New England Bar Association's annual recognition dinner, held in one of those grand ballrooms in downtown Boston that smell like polished mahogany and old ambition, where everyone in the room has spent the better part of their life being the smartest person somewhere and has arrived here to confirm it. Isabel had gone because her firm's managing partner had asked her to represent Langford and Pierce, and representing the firm was part of the job, and Isabel Warren was, above all, someone who did the job correctly. She had been standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water she didn't want, half listening to a conversation she wasn't part of. Two partners from a rival firm trading war stories about an appellate case neither of them had actually won, when someone stepped into her line of sight. Not dramatically. He hadn't tried to be noticed. Hart Slater had simply walked into the room with the unhurried authority of a man who has never once second-guessed whether he belonged somewhere. And Isabel, who noticed everything, noticed him noticing her. The recognition was immediate and slightly inconvenient, the way a good argument is inconvenient. She didn't want to be interested, and she was. Their eyes met for 3 seconds across a room full of important people doing important things. Then he walked over. Direct. No performance. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, he said. I look like I'm working, she said. Same thing sometimes. He offered his hand. Hart Slater. She shook it. His grip was firm without being a statement about it, which she noted approvingly. Isabel Warren. International law. Langford and Pierce, he said, not a guess. He'd read her name tag. Which means you're here because someone senior asked you to be. She tilted her head slightly. And you? Slater Group. Corporate litigation. One of the nominees is a former client. Showing up is how you remind people you exist. He said it without apology, which she found inexplicably refreshing. Can I get you something that isn't sparkling water? She laughed. Actually laughed. The real kind, not the networking kind. Something loosened in her chest that she hadn't realized was clenched. That was the beginning of it. Not a thunderclap. Not a movie moment. Just a man who said exactly what he meant, and a woman who was tired of people who didn't, and 4 hours that dissolved like 40 minutes. They married 11 months later. Fast by any reasonable standard. But when you're 26 and he looks at you like you're a problem worth solving, the interesting kind, and that intensity feels indistinguishable from certainty, you sign the license. You think you know the difference between a man who is focused and a man who has simply not yet run out of things more interesting to focus on. She finishes her earrings now. In the mirror, she looks composed, elegant. Every bit the rising partner at Langford and Pierce, she became 2 years into this marriage, largely because work had something home had stopped offering, forward motion. The call in the other room ends. Footsteps on hardwood. Hart appears in the bathroom doorway, tall, with thick sandy hair and the trace of silver at his temples that arrived at 34 and suited him unreasonably well. He has the kind of face that looks better in person than in photographs, which he has always found slightly unfair. A small scar along his jaw, faint from a skiing accident in his 20s, catches the light. She used to touch it without thinking. A reflex, the way you reach for a railing in the dark. Ready, he says. 5 minutes, she says. He nods and disappears. She turns back to the mirror. Her jaw tightens once, just briefly, then releases. A small private surrender she allows herself only when no one is watching. She presses her lips together and tells herself, as she has told herself before, that 5 more minutes is manageable. It's always the 5 more minutes you think you can survive that end up costing you the most. Chapter 2. The Ashford Grand is a building that understands its own importance and furnishes itself accordingly. 12-foot ceilings. Catering that requires 3 different serving staff per table. A string quartet playing in the corner with the polished restraint of musicians who are very good and very aware that no one is listening to them. The air itself feels curated, cool, faintly floral, the kind of atmosphere that costs money to maintain and exists specifically to make you forget that it does. Isabel moves through the room the way she moves through most rooms. Precisely. With purpose, scanning for the people who matter without making it obvious she's scanning. Hart is 3 feet to her left, and already being pulled toward a cluster of men in dark suits who need something from him. She watches him go with an expression that reveals nothing, then turns in the opposite direction and goes to work. There is a particular discipline that comes from spending 2 years as the unnamed half of a recognized name. And Isabel has perfected it without ever deciding to. She learned early that in rooms like this one, where Hart's name appeared on the invitation and hers arrived as a courtesy, she had 2 choices: shrink into the margin, or build something so undeniable that the room eventually had to rearrange itself around her. She chose the latter. She always chooses the latter. It costs more, and she pays it every time. And she has never once complained about the bill. She has her own clients, her own reputation, her own name on case filings that have made the front page of the Boston Globe twice in the last 18 months. She built that while Hart was on calls, while Hart was in boardrooms, while the apartment sat so quiet on Sunday mornings that she started going into the office just to hear something other than her own thoughts. By 9 o'clock, she has had 3 substantive conversations, exchanged cards with a deputy undersecretary whose department she has been trying to reach for 6 weeks, and navigated 2 different men who confused her professional warmth for personal availability, par for the course. She is reaching for a glass of champagne she doesn't particularly want when she hears her name. Isabel. The voice belongs to Callum Reed, a trade attorney she knows from circuit conferences. Tall, affable, with the kind of easy smile that looks like it was never taught, only grown. Callum, she turns toward him. Something in her loosens slightly, the particular relief of running into someone who doesn't want anything from you. How's the Meridian brief coming along? I heard you pulled something off in the 11th Circuit. Settled last Thursday. Favorably. She allows herself a small, real smile. I'll tell you the details when I'm allowed to. They talk. Properly. The way two people talk when both are actually paying attention, when no one is looking over the other's shoulder for someone more useful. He tells her about a case he lost last month that he's still not over. She tells him exactly why she would have lost it, too. He laughs and says that's deeply unhelpful. She says she knows, and they laugh together. It is such a simple thing, being heard. She had almost forgotten the specific warmth of it. Across the room, Hart Slater stops mid-sentence. He has been listening to a colleague explain something about a development deal on 3 of his Boston properties. Information he should be absorbing, questions he should be forming. Instead, his attention has traveled 30 feet to the left without his permission. Isabel is laughing. Not the professional laugh he recognizes from events like this one. The polite, contained version she deploys when a client makes a mediocre joke. This is the other one. The one that changes the line of her jaw. The one he used to be able to produce. He is standing perfectly still, a drink in his hand, and something about the angle of her shoulders. Open, unguarded, entirely unlike how she holds herself at home, lands in his chest like a key turning in a lock he didn't know was there. An unfamiliar sensation moves through him, and he identifies it with some effort as discomfort. At 10:30, they are in the car heading home. The leather interior, the Boston streets unreeling outside the window in amber and shadow. Isabel with her phone in her hand, reading something, her face lit from below in the way that makes her look younger and somehow more distant at the same time. The silence between them has the texture of something deliberate, not the comfortable silence of two people who don't need to speak, but the careful silence of two people who have learned which subjects to leave alone. Hart watches the road. That attorney, he says eventually. Callum Reed. You know him well. Isabel glances up. From conferences. What? You were talking for a while. She considers this precisely the way she considers things that have layers. A half-second pause. Nothing dramatic. Just the slight adjustment of someone choosing their words with the same precision she'd use in a deposition. He's good at his job. It's refreshing to talk to someone who's genuinely interested in what they do. The silence that follows is not accusatory. She isn't built for accusations. She's standing at the kitchen counter with her coffee, already dressed for the office, when Hart comes in still buttoning his cuff. The apartment holds the particular stillness of early morning. Gray light through floor-to-ceiling windows, the faint percussion of the city 38 floors below, the smell of dark roast, and the faint cedar that lives in the walls of this place like a memory. I got an offer, she says. He reaches past her for a mug. From who? The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. In Geneva. She says it evenly, her eyes on his. They want me to lead a team advising on cross-border trafficking legislation. It's a 2-year position. Hart goes very still. The kind of stillness that isn't peace. The kind that has a shape to it. Geneva, he says. Geneva. He pours his coffee. She watches him process, can see the sequence of it moving behind his pale green eyes. The way information travels through him in categories, logistical, financial, reputational, and then last, the personal. Always last. She has watched him do this for 3 years, and she stopped finding it impressive somewhere around year 2. When did this come through? The official offer was Monday. I've been thinking about it. She pauses. I wanted to think about it before I told you. For days. She had held it for 4 days, turned it over in her mind on the subway, at her desk, in the shower, in the particular silence of Sunday mornings while he slept, and the fact that 4 days had felt necessary rather than unusual told her something she wasn't quite ready to say out loud. Hart sets down his mug. He turns to face her fully. And this, she notices, costs him something. He is not a man accustomed to costing himself anything in the morning. Is this about work? Or is this about us? She looks at him. Really looks. The way she stopped letting herself look somewhere in year 2 because looking had started to cost more than she had available to spend. The familiar face. The scar along his jaw. The man who made her laugh across a ballroom and then, gradually, forgot how. It's about work, she says. It's also about me. Those aren't separate things. Hart is quiet for a long moment. What do you need from me? The question lands with the particular weight of something asked too late, in the wrong register. The question of a man searching for a resolution rather than a man sitting with the problem. I need you to hear what I said, she tells him, and not immediately ask how to fix it. He opens his mouth, closes it. The silence that follows is the most honest thing he has produced in months. She picks up her bag. She does not tell him she hasn't responded to the offer yet. She does not tell him that for 6 days the cursor has been blinking at the end of a sentence she cannot finish. She says, I'll be late tonight. And she walks out of the kitchen and into the particular Tuesday morning that has always been waiting for her. The door closes with a sound like a verdict. Chapter 4. 3 years earlier. The apartment had been new then, which meant it had not yet accumulated the texture of their particular life. The boxes were still half unpacked. The kitchen smelled like fresh paint and the Thai food they'd ordered because neither of them wanted to find the pots yet. Isabel had been sitting on the study floor, surrounded by books she was organizing by the year she first read them, when Hart came in and sat down beside her. No announcement. No offer of help. Just sat down the way you sit beside someone whose company you want, and picked up a book, and proceeded to organize them entirely wrong. Fiction by region. She watched him place authors side by side who had nothing in common except geography, and felt something land in her chest, like something irreversible. She had thought, I want to figure out how to be with this person for the rest of my life. Not the grand gestures. The sitting down on the floor. That version of Hart had existed. She hadn't imagined him. By the end of year 1, the sitting down on the floor version was harder to find. He was present in the apartment the way furniture is present, reliable, useful, not really there. The calls had multiplied. The trips had elongated. London 1 week. Chicago the next. San Francisco after that. She stopped marking his absences on the calendar because the exercise had started to feel like cartography of a country she had stopped visiting. She remembers a specific Saturday in October. Year 2. She had been sick. Not seriously, just the particular misery of a sinus infection that makes the whole world feel 6 inches too close. She had texted him. He had been in a strategy session and responded 4 hours later with a heart emoji and the name of a pharmacy app. She had lain in bed and looked at the ceiling and thought, this is what it is now. She didn't rage about it. She didn't cry. She lay in the dark and listened to the apartment settle around her, and she felt nothing erupt, just a vast and terrible calm. She was 28 years old, and she had already decided that this was what the rest of her life was going to feel like, and she had made her peace with it. That was the saddest part. Not the decision. The peace. 3 weeks before the gala, the Geneva inquiry had come through a colleague, a human rights attorney named Rosalind Farr, who had her number from a conference in The Hague. A brief message, professional and direct. There's a position you'd be extraordinary for. Is it something you'd consider? Isabel had read it twice, closed her phone, opened it, read it again. Something moved in her chest that she didn't immediately recognize, then did, with the slight disorientation of encountering something you thought you'd lost. It was want. Simple, directional, entirely her own. She had not told Hart for a week. Then 2. Then the weeks accumulated into a month of preliminary conversations with Geneva, learning the scope, the team, the specific texture of what the work would require, and she had stood in her office at 9 in the evening, looking at the Charles River through the window, and felt for the first time in a long time something that wasn't grief. It was the feeling of a door opening onto a room that had always been hers. She is at her laptop now. The apartment is quiet in that familiar, furnished way. The cursor blinks in the reply field of Geneva's formal offer letter. She types, "I am honored by this opportunity and would like to." Then she stops, deletes it, sits with her hands in her lap and the blue light of the screen on her face, the cursor blinking, patient and indifferent, waiting for her to decide who she is going to be. Somewhere behind her, the door to the bedroom is closed. She tries to locate, somewhere in her chest, a reason to stay. Chapter 5. Hart finds it by accident. He is looking for a lease document on one of their Cambridge investment properties, a file he is certain he saved, cannot locate. He opens her laptop without thinking. The way you open a cabinet in your own house. The laptop is unlocked. The email is open on the screen. Dear Ms. Warren, we are delighted to confirm your appointment as Senior Legal Advisor to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, effective March 15th. As discussed, the position is based in Geneva, Switzerland. He reads it once. Then again. There is a specific quality to the moment when something you sensed but refused to name finally assembles itself into language. It doesn't feel like a revelation. It feels like a door closing, the soft, final click of a mechanism completing exactly what it was built to do. He had known, had watched her at the gala, had heard the precise nothing in her voice when she said, "I'm still considering." Had chosen, with the practiced deficiency of a man who has spent a decade managing what he allows himself to feel, not to follow the thought to its conclusion. The email follows it for him. March 15th. 11 weeks. He sits down, not because he decides to. His knees make the decision. He sits in her chair at her desk, surrounded by the particular order of her workspace. The color-coded legal pads, the photograph of her mother, the coffee mug with the ring stain she never bothered to clean. Details he has walked past 100 times. They land on him now with the full weight of everything he hasn't paid attention to. It moves through him in sequence. Grief comes later. First, something colder. The gala. The way she laughed with that attorney, her whole body open and unguarded. The careful flatness in her voice on the drive home. The way she looked at him over her coffee mug on Thursday morning, her expression carrying something worse than anger. Completion, like she had arrived at the end of a calculation and was simply waiting for him to catch up. He closes the laptop, walks to the window, presses one hand flat against the glass and feels the cold move through his palm, and stands there until the city lights blur at the edges. When he hears her key in the door, he doesn't move. She comes in, sets her bag down, sees his shape in the dark. Owen, she catches herself. Hart. He turns. She sees his face, and something in her goes completely still. In 3 years, she has never seen him look like this. Unguarded in a way that makes him look younger and more real. The scar along his jaw catching the low light. His pale green eyes wide and stripped of the efficiency he wraps around everything. Like a man standing in a house he suddenly doesn't recognize. Not because it changed, but because he finally stopped moving fast enough to see it. "You have a start date," he says. "Yes." "When were you going to tell me?" "When I was ready." The silence between them is different from every silence they've shared. Those were empty. This one is pressurized, like the air before weather arrives. Isabel. Her name in that voice. Low, unfortified. She hasn't heard it like that since before she stopped counting the good days. "Don't," she says. Quiet. Courtroom still. "Don't start a sentence you weren't going to start 6 months ago." He crosses the room and stops 3 feet from her. Close enough that she has to look up slightly. Close enough that she can feel the effort it costs him to stand still. And here's the thing about 3 years. The body doesn't forget. The mind builds walls, restructures, learns to need less. But the body remembers without permission. "I don't want you to go," he says. The words are quiet, direct, undecorated. They land in the space between them and stay there. She looks at him for a long moment. Something crosses her face that isn't satisfaction and isn't grief. The specific exhaustion of a woman who was right about something she never wanted to be right about. "You should have thought about that," she says, "when you had time." The silence that follows is the longest one yet. And then she doesn't know who moves first. She will think about this later and won't be able to reconstruct the sequence. Only that the distance collapsed without announcement, the way things do when two people have been holding themselves apart until the holding becomes its own exhaustion. His hand finds her face. Not urgent, just certain, the way he touched her in the first year when certainty was the only language he knew. Her breath catches. Her hand closes around his wrist, not to pull away, just to hold on to something solid. He says her name again. Just that. Just Isabel, in the voice that belongs to no boardroom. She closes her eyes. What happens next belongs only to them, to the dark apartment and the amber glow of the city and the 11 weeks sitting on the other side of the door. It is not a solution. They both know that. But there are moments that exist outside of solutions, and this is one of them. Chapter 6. In the morning, the light comes through the curtains in long, pale lines. She wakes before him, lies still, watching the ceiling. His arm is across her waist. She looks at the silver at his temple in the early light, the scar along his jaw. She thinks about touching it. She doesn't. She gets up quietly, goes to the kitchen, makes coffee for two, stands holding both mugs, looking out at the Charles River in the pale morning, trying to determine whether last night was a beginning or a goodbye dressed in the language of one. She doesn't have an answer. The cursor is still blinking on her laptop across the room, patient and indifferent, waiting for her to finish the sentence she started. She doesn't leave that night. She goes to the bedroom, closes the door, not a slam, just a deliberate click. And Hart stands in the living room and doesn't follow because he doesn't know how, which has always been the problem. But in the morning, she's still there. She's at the kitchen counter and running clothes. She hasn't gone running in yet, both hands around her mug, when she hears his footsteps in the hall. She gives herself one more second of the quiet, the way you finish a breath before something difficult. He comes out looking like he hasn't slept. She knows this version of him. It lives in the forward set of his shoulders, the specific weight of a man who spent the night arriving somewhere he wasn't ready to go. Neither of them speaks about what happened. The apartment holds it for them, the way rooms hold things that haven't yet been named in daylight. He sits at the kitchen table, not standing, not already moving. He sits and folds his hands and looks at her. "I need you to tell me," he says. "All of it. I want to hear it." She looks at him for a long moment. She has rehearsed versions of this conversation in the shower, at her desk, in the silence of Sunday mornings. She knows every word. The question has never been whether she could say it. The question has always been whether there was anyone on the other side ready to receive it. She looks at his folded hands, at the undefended quality of his face. And she decides. She sets down her mug, and she tells him. In order. The first year, the dinners, the way she kept trying and couldn't find the door. The night she almost said, "I don't think this is working," and he asked about his closing time instead. The 2 coffees she poured down the drain. The Sunday mornings watching the light change on the walls, thinking quietly that this was not what she had said yes to. She doesn't cry, but her voice carries something worn through in places. The sound of someone who has carried a weight so far and for so long that they no longer notice its shape, only its mass. Hart listens, completely still. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't defend, doesn't reach for the counterarguments she can see him assembling and setting aside. And the longer he listens, the more his expression shifts. Not to guilt, though guilt is there, to something she didn't expect. Recognition. Like he is hearing a story he should have already known. When she finishes, the apartment is very quiet. "I didn't realize," he says, "how much of it I missed." "I know you didn't." She pauses. "That was part of the problem. I retreat," he says. "When something matters to me, significantly, I retreat. It's not a strategy. I don't think it's even a choice." He holds her gaze. "That isn't an excuse." "I know," she says. He extends his hand across the table. Not reaching, just placing it there. Open, palm up. An offer without conditions. She looks at his hand. She thinks about last night. About the second mug of coffee she's holding. About Lake Geneva and mornings that belong entirely to her. About the floor of the study and the books organized wrong. Her fingers move slightly, an involuntary reach that stops itself. A reflex her mind overrules before it completes. She doesn't take it. I need to think, she says. He pulls his hand back slowly, the gesture of a man accepting a verdict he knows is fair. I know, he says. And it sounds, for the first time in a very long time, like the truth. Not a concession. Not a closing argument. Just a man at a kitchen table in the morning after the night that changed the shape of everything, saying the only 2 words he has left. It sounds like the first thing he has said in 3 years that costs him something. Chapter 7. Here is the thing about Hart Slater that the people who work for him do not understand about him. He is not a man without feeling. He is a man who was taught, at a specific and formative age, that feeling was a variable, something you managed, controlled, and optimized toward a desired outcome. His father had run a shipping conglomerate and a family with the same operational efficiency, which produced 2 things: significant financial success and sons who were very good at making decisions and very poor at sitting in the same room as their own hearts. The Slater men did not discuss difficulty. They resolved it. They did not grieve losses. They conducted post-mortems, identified the failure point, and restructured. Feeling in that house was not forbidden. It was simply never modeled as something that could coexist with function. And so Hart learned, early, thoroughly, to put it somewhere it wouldn't interfere. He knows this about himself, has known it for years, in the abstract way that men sometimes know things without letting the knowing change anything. The way you can identify a structural flaw in a building and continue to live in it because the building is still standing. Because nothing has fallen yet. And then Geneva got an address. And 11 weeks became 10. And the loss stopped being an abstraction and became a specific date on a specific calendar. And the building, which had been standing, which had always been standing, made a sound he had never heard it make before. Not a collapse. Something quieter. The sound of a foundation that has been bearing weight for a very long time, finally truthfully reporting the damage. Some men only discover what they're losing when the loss acquires a departure gate. Hart Slater he is learning, one of those men. He finds this neither surprising nor forgivable. He finds it simply devastatingly true. He tries anyway. The week after the kitchen conversation, he is home for dinner every night. Not announced, not performative, just present in the way that presence is its own statement when absence has been the pattern. He is there when she comes in. He looks up from his laptop. He asks how her day was and waits for the actual answer instead of half listening while his eyes drift back to the screen. These are small things. He is aware they are small things. He does them anyway, because small things are what he has, and he is, for the first time in 3 years, unwilling to offer nothing. On Wednesday, he cooks badly, from a recipe he found and followed with the focused intensity he usually reserves for acquisitions. He annotates the margins of the printed page. He times each step on his phone. He approaches the reduction of a cream sauce with the same methodical seriousness he brings to term sheets. The pasta is overcooked. He puts it on the table anyway, because putting it on the table is the point, not the pasta. Isabel looks at it, then at him. "You made pasta," she says. "I made pasta," he agrees. "It's a little soft." "I'm aware." She eats it. She doesn't say it's good, because it isn't, and she has never been built for comfortable untruths. But she eats it, and that is its own language, and he receives it that way. 10 weeks. He watches her across the dinner table and thinks, "I am watching a woman I married leave the room while still sitting in the chair, and I have been watching this for 2 years without understanding what I was seeing." He is beginning to understand. Used for dinner perhaps 12 times in 3 years, and for her work documents twice that. She is building the framework for the trafficking legislation she has been brought on to advise, jurisdiction maps, precedent cases from The Hague and Brussels, A stack of reports from the International Labor Organization that she has already annotated in blue ink. Hart comes home to find her there. He stops in the hallway. She looks up. Neither of them says anything about the fact that he is home at 8:30 on a Tuesday, which would have been unusual 3 weeks ago, and is not unusual now. Do you want tea? He asks. She pauses. Yes. Black. He makes tea. He brings 2 mugs. He sets one beside her and takes the chair across the table, and he picks up one of the ILO reports and reads it. She watches him. You don't have to, she starts. I know. He keeps reading. After a while, he sets it down. The jurisdictional overlap between Swiss domestic law and international mandate. Have you worked through how you're going to navigate that? She looks at him. He used to practice international arbitration before pivoting to corporate litigation in his late 20s. She had forgotten this. Or perhaps she had stopped counting on it. I have a framework, she says slowly. But there are 3 points I haven't resolved. Walk me through them. She does. He listens, asks 2 questions she hasn't thought to ask herself, and she makes notes in the margin of her legal pad in the particular shorthand that means she will come back to this. They work together at the dining table in the apartment that has not seen this kind of shared quiet, not the avoiding kind, not the careful silence kind, and longer than she can remember. The city hums 38 floors below. The tea goes cold. She makes another pot. At some point he says, without looking up from the precedent case he's reading, I should have asked about your work. Years ago. She doesn't respond immediately. She finishes the sentence she's writing. Yes, she says finally. I wasn't uninterested. He stops. Considers. I was managing. Keeping things at a level I could control. Including you. Another pause. That's not a compliment to myself. No, she agrees. The honesty of it sits in the room. She does not soften it, and he does not ask her to. The apartment is very quiet, the kind of quiet that has temperature now, warm and close, the intimacy of 2 people who have spent 2 hours inside the same problem and emerged on the same side. Hart, she says. Warning or invitation? She isn't entirely sure. He is close enough that she can see the green of his eyes clearly, the scar along his jaw, the tiredness around his mouth that belongs to a man working this week at something harder than any acquisition he has managed. She has studied this face across tables and through car windows, always at a remove. He is not at a remove right now. His hand moves, slow, deliberate. He tucks a loose curl behind her ear. One small motion. His fingers barely graze her temple. She goes very still. She is not made of stone. She married him because when he was in a room, she felt the room differently. 3 years of careful emotional restructuring, and it has not changed, which is its own kind of information. She puts her hand over his. Stops it. Doesn't move it away. Just holds it there. Don't, she says. Quiet, stripped of performance. Not if you can't be consistent. His pale green eyes stay steady. The not retreating costs him something visible. I'm trying to learn how, he says. I know. She lowers his hand with the careful motion of a woman returning something she very much wants to keep and cannot yet afford to. Sets it on the table. He doesn't say don't go. He stays at the table and watches her collect her glasses and her organized mind, and watches her pause at the hallway entrance. She looks back once. In the look, there is something she doesn't bother to conceal. Not an answer. Not a promise. Just the unguarded truth of a woman who feels more than she is currently able to act on, letting him see it anyway. Good night, Hart, she says. Good night, Isabel. He listens to her footsteps until they stop. Sits with his elbows on the table, her jurisdiction maps still spread in her handwriting across the surface. Breathes through it. The specific discipline of a man learning what it costs to be the one who stays at the table. Chapter 9. 3 days before she leaves, Hart drives to his parents' house in coastal Connecticut. He had not planned to say anything. He went because Boston had become too full of the specific geometry of her departure. Her suitcase in the corner of the bedroom, the slow disappearance of her things from the bathroom shelf, the apartment already beginning to practice her absence. He ends up in his father's study on Saturday afternoon. He isn't sure how. One moment, he is standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, and the next he is in the leather chair across from Robert Slater's desk. The room smells like it has always smelled. Old paper and wood polish and the particular authority of a man who has never once questioned his place in a room. Something about being back inside that smell, inside the house where he learned every pattern he has spent 3 years enacting, loosens something in his chest he hasn't been able to reach. Some things you can only see from the place where you first learned not to look. His father sets down his pen, studies him. "You look terrible. My wife is leaving," Hart says. "For Geneva. 2 years. A beat. Possibly for good. And I don't know how to ask her to stay without making it about me." He hears himself say it. Here's the specific shape of the admission. Something settles. The way things settle when they've been held in suspension too long. His father is quiet for a moment. "Then, when your mother and I had our difficult years, I was running the Rotterdam expansion. Never home. She had everything else." He folds his hands in a gesture Hart recognizes because he does it himself at kitchen tables and in depositions whenever something costs him. "One day she told me she was going to her sister's in Edinburgh. A month." Hart remembers this. He had been 14, had not understood it. "I drove her to the airport," his father says. "And on the way I told her the thing I hadn't been able to say for 2 years, that I had built our life around my work because needing her terrified me, that I had made her pay for my terror." He picks up his pen. It works if it's true. It doesn't work if it's a tactic. Hart drives back that evening. 3 hours on I-95 with the windows up and the radio off. The kind of clarity that only arrives after someone names a thing you've been carrying unnamed for years. Afraid of what it means to actually need someone. He had married a woman who was extraordinary and autonomous and utterly herself. And he had spent 3 years keeping careful distance from her because the genuine alternative, where you let someone become load-bearing, was the most frightening thing he could imagine. So he had managed the fear by withdrawing, and she had managed the withdrawal by rebuilding herself into someone who no longer needed him. He had engineered the exact outcome he was most afraid of. He had been so careful to protect himself from loss that he had made the loss inevitable. He drives. The highway unspools ahead of him, indifferent and lit. Chapter 10. The night before she leaves, she is packing. He can hear it from the living room. The zip of a bag, the drawer that sticks slightly, the deliberate silence of someone moving through a space with the purposefulness of departure. Each sound lands with a precision that has nothing to do with volume. He knocks on the bedroom door. "Come in," she says. She is folding a dress over the bed. She looks up and waits, with the patience of a woman who is not going to make this easier for him, and who is right not to. He tells her, not the organized version he had constructed on the drive back. Points made in sequence, a case well argued, the Hart Slater approach to difficult rooms. What comes out instead is messier and true, which are often the same thing. About his father. About the fear. About the specific moment 3 nights ago at the dining table. Her case files, her reading glasses, her jurisdiction maps, her shoulders 6 inches from his. When he understood that he had been standing at the edge of the most important room of his life for 3 years and calling it caution. When he finishes, the room is very quiet. She is still, the dress folded in her hands. "That's true," she says finally. "Isn't it?" "Yeah." Not a speech. "No." She sets the dress down. Looks at him. Not with the careful neutrality of the past weeks. Not with the exhaustion of someone who has carried something too long. With something older. The woman who laughed at the bar association dinner. The woman who tried for 14 months. The woman who cried in the shower once. Not because he was cruel, but because he wasn't. "I'm still going to Geneva," she says. "I know. The position matters. I matter. That isn't negotiable. I know that too." He holds her gaze. Takes one breath. The breath of a man stepping off something he has been standing on for a very long time. "I'm not asking you not to go. I'm asking if you would consider me, in whatever that looks like now. The room holds it. She picks up the dress. Resumes folding it with the precise, deliberate motions of a woman finishing what she started. He watches her hands. He waits, without retreating, without restructuring, without looking for the next position. He just waits. It is the hardest thing he has done. I'll think about it, she says. It is the first thing she has said in weeks that sounds like a door left open rather than a door that has finished closing. Chapter 11. March 12th. Logan International. The car service arrives at 9. Hart carries her bag downstairs. She lets him, which is its own small signal, the kind neither of them comments on. The lobby is already in full morning motion. Doormen, a woman in scrubs waiting for a ride, a man walking 2 golden retrievers in opposite directions, the ordinary machinery of a city that does not pause for private reckonings. In the car, she watches Boston move past the window. 3 years of mornings and commutes and events and silence, all of it scrolling by in the gray March light. The brownstone streets, the river, the bridge they walked across on their second date, the 38 floors she is leaving behind. She takes inventory without sentimentality, the way you do when you are not running from something, but walking away from it with full knowledge of what you're leaving and why. She doesn't feel the grief she expected. She feels something closer to clarity, the particular weightlessness of a decision made fully and without apology. Hart is beside her. He doesn't talk. He has, she notices, stopped filling silence with the wrong things. It has taken 3 years and 11 weeks and 1 overcooked pasta dinner. But he has learned this, at least, that silence is not always a problem to be solved. At departures, the driver pulls to the curb. Hart gets out first, comes around, opens her door. A small practiced motion that used to feel like performance and today feels simply like care, which is a distinction she has spent 3 years trying to make and is only now able to. He takes her bag from the trunk. They stand on the sidewalk in the gray March light. Planes crossing the sky overhead. The white noise of the airport surrounding them like a held breath. She takes her bag from him. Hart, she says. Isabel. She looks at him. Really looks. The way she stopped letting herself look somewhere in year 2, because looking had started to cost more than she had available to spend. The familiar face. The pale green eyes. The scar along his jaw that she used to touch without thinking, then stopped touching, then one night in the amber dark of their apartment touched again. The man she married in a rush, lived beside in silence, and is now standing in front of at an airport, 3 years older, trying to locate what is still true. She lets herself look for a long moment. She owes herself that much. I am not the woman who will wait anymore, she says. The words arrive without heat, without accusation, just the flat, clear delivery of a woman stating something she has earned the right to state. Not as a warning, just as a fact. I know who I am. I know what I built while you were looking the other way. And I know what it cost me. And I am not available to pay that cost again. I understand, he says. I need space to do this work. I need this to be mine. She holds his gaze. I am not going to fold a life in Geneva around anything that pulls me back into the version of myself I just left behind. I know. He holds her gaze with the steadiness she has only recently learned to trust. That's not what I'm proposing. She waits. He reaches into his jacket pocket, sets a boarding pass on top of her bag, quietly, without ceremony, the way he does the things that cost him the most. Geneva, same flight, seat 14A, 1 row behind hers, the other things first. His voice is even. But underneath the evenness, she can hear it, the specific effort of a man who has stopped managing the outcome and is simply, for the first time, showing up and letting the chips fall. The ticket doesn't mean I'm coming, he says. It means I wanted the option to ask. The airport moves around them, indifferently, ongoing. A family with too much luggage. A couple at the next entrance folded into each other in the particular way of people who are not ready to let go. Isabel looks at the boarding pass. Looks at the man who printed it 3 days ago, and said nothing. who carried it in his jacket through the car ride and the lobby and the gray March sidewalk, waiting, actually waiting, without strategy, without pressure, for the right moment to place it in her hands. New terms, she says. New terms, he says. You work. I don't crowd you. I find my own footing in a city I don't know. The corner of his mouth moves almost imperceptibly, which is probably something I'm overdue for. You'd leave your firm. I take a leave. There's a difference. He pauses. I've already spoken to my partners. She stares at him. Something shifts in her chest. A slow tectonic movement, the kind that doesn't announce itself until the ground has already changed. When did you do all of this? The week after the dining table, he says simply. The case files. The jurisdiction maps. The tea. He says it without decoration, without performance. Just the plain accounting of a man who finally understood what mattered and started moving toward it without waiting to be asked. I needed to know whether it was true or whether it was just another thing I was managing. I needed to know the difference. She is very still. And, she says, it's true. The silence between them is nothing like the silences of the past 3 years. Those were hollow, furnished with avoidance and the careful architecture of two people not saying things. This one is full, warm, pressurized, entirely alive. The silence of something that is not an ending. And then she laughs. Not the professional laugh. Not the polite, contained version she has deployed across 1,000 rooms. The real one. The one that changes the line of her jaw. The one he heard across a bar association ballroom 3 years ago and has been trying to find his way back to ever since. It arrives without warning, bright and unguarded. And it is the most beautiful thing he has heard in 3 years. He does not say so, because he doesn't need to. She can see it on his face. And she lets herself see it. And neither of them looks away. You are, she says when the laugh settles, genuinely unbelievable. I've been told. This doesn't mean everything is fixed. I know. Geneva is mine. The work is mine. You are, she searches for the word. Adjacent. For now. Adjacent, he repeats. I'll take it. Chapter 13. She picks up her bag, looks at the boarding pass still in her hand, tucks it into her coat pocket. A small motion that is also, quietly, a decision. She looks at him one more time. The pale green eyes. The scar along his jaw. The man who sat down on the floor of a study and organized her books wrong and never stopped being, underneath everything, the person she wanted to figure out. You're going to need a better coat, she says. Geneva in March is nothing like Boston. Something in his face opens. Not relief, not triumph. Something quieter and more durable than either. The specific expression of a man who has just understood that he has been given not a second chance, but something rarer. A first chance at something real, offered by a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and has chosen, with full information and open eyes, to see what he does with it. I'll manage, he says. You'll try, she says. There's a difference. She says it with the ghost of a smile, the real one still there, carried at the corner of her mouth like something she's decided to stop suppressing. She turns toward the entrance. He falls into step beside her. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside. The automatic doors open. The airport receives them. Outside, the gray March sky is doing what March skies in Boston always do, holding its weather in reserve, deciding nothing yet, leaving the forecast open. Isabel Warren walks through those doors carrying her own name, her own work, her own hard-won clarity, and the boarding pass of a man who finally learned that love is not a variable to be managed but a room you choose to stay in, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. Hart Slater walks beside her, not managing the outcome, not running the numbers on whether this is a risk worth taking, just present, just honest, just there, which is, she is beginning to believe, the only thing she ever actually needed. The distance between who they were 3 years ago and who they are standing here is not small. The distance ahead of them is not certain. But the ground beneath their feet has changed, and both of them know it. and neither of them pretends otherwise. It is all things considered: the gala, the laptop, the overcooked pasta, the boarding pass, the 3 years of silence, and the one morning of truth. The right kind of beginning. Not a thunderclap. Not a movie moment. Just two people walking through the same door, finally, at the same time. Hello, lovers and billionaires. We have come to the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, take a few seconds to like the video and drop a comment, and if you're not a part of the family yet, please subscribe and turn on notifications. This is our own little corner of the internet, so be sure to visit every day because I upload exciting, emotional, and unforgettable stories every single day, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.